My parents moved to Findhorn when I was 13 and left me in Sussex, England, boarding at the Michael Hall Waldorf School. And in the Easter holidays, I went up on the night train from London to northern Scotland near Inverness and visited the family. And while at the family, I attended one of Findhorn's quarterly conferences. And I listened to a speech by Sam Kean, author of Fire in the Belly, and what he was talking about there was Faces of the Enemy. And I absolutely loved it. I loved his presentation. I enjoyed learning from him. And by the end of the vacation, and actually it wasn't just a vacation, I actually attended what was called the Findhorn Experience Week, where someone new spends a week living at Findhorn. And while I was doing the Experience Week, in the first hour of coming together, I experienced something that I've never seen before or since. And it was 30 or so random strangers who started out in complete conflict with one another about who was going to do what, because Findhorn is famous for giant organic vegetables, is the best way to say it. Because when Eileen and Peter Caddy, the founders of Findhorn, moved there, they started tuning into plant consciousness that they called Devic consciousness. They tuned into plant consciousness, and while tuned in, followed unusual gardening practices. If you've ever been up to northern Scotland and certainly Findhorn, it's very sandy. There's not a lot of organic matter. The weather is not very conducive to growing plants. California is kind of the exact opposite. And by listening to these plant consciousness, they grew giant cabbages, giant pumpkins, everything about their garden was extraordinary. And this became the kind of claim to fame, because, there may be dozens and dozens of people that, talk to plants, but, if those plants die, if those plants just look like any other plant, it doesn't really stand out. In our more materialistic culture, we want to see some evidence. And so, these huge vegetables that were winning awards and stuff made them stand out. That put them on the news and stuff. And so most people who have heard of the Findhorn community have heard about the giant organic vegetables. And so that's what they come to Findhorn to see. They want to see the garden, they want to see the vegetables and all that. And how you do Experience Week is you divide up in groups of 4. So, and then you're assigned chores and to live aspects of community life. So 4 people cook, 4 people do housekeeping, 4 people work in the garden, 4 keep people clean toilets, 4 keep people, whatever it is. It's 4, 4, 4, 4, with 30 people. And of course, everyone comes there with the idea, I want to work in the garden. And so they began the Experience Week by saying, okay, we're going to divide you up into groups of 4. Who'd like to work in the garden? Everyone raised their hand. Who'd like to do housekeeping? Maybe 1 or 2 people. Who'd like to, cook? Pretty much nobody wanted to do anything. They wanted to all work in the garden. And so in consensus power structures, what would you do? You'd draw straws, for example. That would have been one way to do it without conflict. You just put all the jobs in a bowl, 30 jobs, 30 people, and people just, they can't read it, and they take a little bit of paper out, and that's your job. And then, of course, you're going to feel 26 people are going to feel I didn't get the garden job, and so there's going to be some disappointment, and there's a sense like, well, there's no fairer way to go about it, but it's a disappointment, and so that would be a normal kind of somewhat egalitarian way of doing things. And then there would be the authoritarian approach, where someone's going to say, you four for the garden, you four for this, and that's someone else is going to tell you what to do. But that's not what happened here. For the first time in my life, I was introduced to the concept of attunement. And I was introduced to attunement by focalizers. And the attunement process was opening up to the resonance field of the energy that was for they asked for the diva. In devic consciousness you have divas. They asked for the diva of the experience week to guide each person to pick the right job for them. And we all connected to the field of our optimal workshop. And took about 5 minutes, 10 at the absolute most, but we just were quiet. Now at the end of the process, and they said, please tune in to what job you would get the most out of doing. And after that little attunement, the focalizers went round the circle again. So 10 minutes earlier, everyone wanted to be in the garden. 10 minutes later, who wants to do cooking? 4 hands went up. Who wants to do housekeeping? 4 hands went up. Who wants to do this? And in the end, who wants to do gardening? 4 hands went up. There was no bickering. There was no disappointment. There was no dictatorship. Everyone in that attunement process got where their best experience would come from. And I was one of them. So I was a 13-year-old boy who wanted to do gardening. And instead, I felt excited about doing cooking. And that was probably one of my first exciting cooking experiences. And cooking has been a tremendous joy in my life. And so I watched myself in some mysterious way go from wanting to do gardening to wanting to cook. But more importantly, the symmetry of this entire dynamic. It is the single most potent and beautiful structure of decision-making that I've ever witnessed in my life. Because there was no randomness. It wasn't like throw your preference into a hat or something like that. There was no randomness. There was no vertical power structure. There was no compulsion. You're going to do this whether you like it or not. There was no martyrhood. There was no sacrifice of you're going to, someone has to clean the toilet. Okay, I'll be the martyr. No. There was a graceful alignment. And every person got their best experience out of that process. And I loved the cooking. I didn't miss or feel disappointed about the gardening and stuff. And so that brief moment in Findhorn has just reminded me that there are other options for doing things. Because I can go anywhere around the world and say that everyone's going to agree by attunement or whatever, and people will throw it out, or there will be people saying, no, you've got to have a war to get people to do what they don't want to do, and kids have got to go to school even though they hate it, and all this stuff. And the said is that's just normal. That's life. You've got to make sacrifices. You've got to make compromises, and sometimes you've got to do what you don't want to do. And yet, we were all very engaged, all very hardworking. We'd actually paid money to do chores. Would be one way of looking at it in a more cynical, vein. And we were happy in this attunement dynamic. And so that is one divergent method of authority, alignment, and power. It's one among all the different power structures that I've encountered on the planet. And it is one that I didn't know existed. And it is one that I would not have guessed existed, and that I would have doubted if I didn't experience it. And it's just one of maybe 20 power structures that I've experienced in my life, living in this country, and, pressurizing people in this way and that way and stuff. And so there's, I've been exposed to 20 power structures, give or take. And here's one that is completely different and unexpected from all of them. And I think the thing that it does for me more than anything is tell me that there are always other ways, that those ways lie in the unknown, that the unknown is known in the past, in the future, in parallel, in alternate realities in this part of the globe or in that part of the globe, that the unknown, what is unknown for me, is known, or has been known, or will be known, someplace, somewhere. But it's not known here. And there's almost certainly a way that I don't know, that I can't imagine, to do just about anything, and to do it significantly better than the way that I or anyone else I know is doing things. And I think that's a beautiful doorway into the mystery of the unknown.